A humble boy finds a starving dog on the street. Hungry and with nothing but a piece of bread, he makes a choice that no one expected. But what happens next transforms both of their lives in such a moving way that tears are inevitable. In the bitter cold of a Chicago night, where the wind cut through every crack of the deserted streets, 10-year-old Ethan clutched a wrapped piece of bread against his patched coat. The city seemed to conspire against anyone who dared to walk its empty paths, but he had no choice. Since his mother's departure and his father's unexplained disappearance, the streets had become his unwanted home, his survival dependent on determination and occasional acts of kindness from strangers. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from, and we'll keep going. The harsh winter wind whipped around corners, forcing him to seek whatever shelter he could find. His small frame shivered against the cold as he searched for a place to rest, the wrapped bread his only possession of value. The streetlights cast long shadows across the abandoned buildings, their dim glow offering little comfort in the urban wilderness. A faint sound caught his attention, something between a whimper and a bark. Curiosity overcame his caution, and he followed the noise until he spotted a thin dog with matted fur. The animal watched him from a distance, hesitant yet alert. Its bright eyes reflected something Ethan recognized immediately: hunger. Without hesitation, he broke off a piece of his precious bread and placed it on the ground. The dog approached carefully, quickly devouring the offering. In that moment, looking at those grateful eyes, Ethan made a decision. "I'll call you Max," he said softly. From that instant, an unbreakable bond formed between them. Max seemed to understand Ethan's loneliness, and in exchange for that first piece of bread, offered something priceless: companionship and a sense of security. Together they faced the challenges of the unforgiving city. Max's keen nose proved invaluable in finding discarded food, which they shared equally, no matter how meager the portions. At night, they huddled together in makeshift shelters, their combined warmth a shield against the biting cold. Their partnership grew stronger with each passing day. Max's presence changed everything for Ethan. No longer did he have to face the world alone. The dog's protective instincts provided a sense of safety he hadn't felt since losing his family. They developed their own routine, moving through the city's forgotten spaces, always alert but finding comfort in each other's presence. Days blended into weeks as they navigated their shared existence. Max proved to be more than just a companion. He became Ethan's guardian, his sharp senses always alert to potential dangers or opportunities. The dog's instincts seemed almost supernatural at times, leading them to places where they were most likely to find help or resources. They learned to read each other's signals, developing a silent language of their own. When Max's ears perked up or his tail stiffened, Ethan knew to be extra cautious. Similarly, Max seemed to sense Ethan's moods, pressing closer when the boy felt particularly down or scared. Their bond deepened through these shared experiences, each day strengthening their connection. The city's harshness seemed less daunting with Max by his side. Together they explored various neighborhoods, learning which areas were safe and which to avoid. Max's presence often softened people's hearts, occasionally resulting in extra scraps of food or even a kind word. These small gestures of humanity helped Ethan maintain hope in better days ahead. Their daily routine consisted of careful exploration and survival. Each morning, they would venture out together, Max's nose leading them to possibilities while Ethan kept watch. The dog's protective nature became evident as he would position himself between Ethan and any perceived threats, his loyalty unwavering and absolute. As night descended once again over Chicago, neither Ethan nor Max could have known that their lives were about to change dramatically. The city held secrets waiting to be uncovered, and fate had placed them at the crossroads of an extraordinary discovery. As they settled into their shelter for the night, the wind howling through empty streets carried with it the promise of adventure and mystery that would test their bond in ways they could never imagine. The next few days would bring encounters and revelations that would challenge everything they knew about survival and trust. But for now, they had each other, and in the harsh reality of their world, that seemed like enough. The stage was set for an unexpected turn of events that would lead them down a path neither could have anticipated, beginning with a discovery that would change their lives forever. Their luck began to shift unexpectedly one crisp morning as Ethan and Max explored the busy square near downtown Chicago. The streets were starting to fill with the usual morning crowd, business people hurrying to their offices, vendors setting up their stalls, and the constant hum of city life growing louder with each passing minute. Max, who had been trotting alongside Ethan, suddenly stopped. His nose twitched and his ears perked up with unusual interest. Ethan had learned to trust these subtle changes in his companion's behavior. They often led to something worth investigating. The dog began sniffing intensely at a pile of rubble near an old construction site, his tail wagging with growing excitement. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered, approaching carefully. The area was partially hidden from the main street, debris and forgotten construction materials scattered about. Max's paws worked frantically, digging through the loose soil and fragments of brick. Ethan knelt beside him, curiosity overcoming his initial hesitation. As Max continued to dig, something caught the light, a brief glimmer among the dirt and stone. Ethan reached down, his fingers brushing against something solid and round. Carefully, he extracted the object from its resting place, a coin, unlike any he had ever seen before. The coin was heavy in his small hand, its surface covered in intricate engravings that seemed to tell stories from another time. Despite years of being buried beneath city rubble, the details remained surprisingly clear. Unusual symbols and patterns decorated both sides, and the metal had a peculiar weight that suggested it was more than just ordinary currency. Ethan turned the coin over in his hands, studying the mysterious markings. The craftsmanship appeared ancient, each detail meticulously carved into the metal. He couldn't read the symbols, but something about them felt important, as if they held secrets waiting to be discovered. "Good job, Max," Ethan praised, scratching behind his friend's ears. The dog's tail wagged proudly, aware that his discovery had pleased his young companion. They spent several minutes examining their find, Ethan careful to memorize every detail of the unusual artifact. As the morning progressed, they made their way through the increasingly crowded streets, the coin safely tucked away in Ethan's pocket. Its weight seemed to give him a new sense of purpose, though he couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was valuable enough to trade for food, or maybe it could help them find a warmer place to sleep. Throughout the day, Ethan and Max continued their usual routine, but the coin remained a constant presence in Ethan's thoughts. Every so often, he would slip his hand into his pocket, touching the cool metal as if to reassure himself it wasn't just a dream. Max seemed to sense the importance of their discovery, staying closer to Ethan than usual. They visited their regular spots, the back alley behind the bakery where kind-hearted workers sometimes left day-old bread, the small park where pigeons gathered, and the quiet corners where they could rest without drawing attention. But today felt different, charged with a new energy that neither boy nor dog could fully understand. As evening approached, they found a relatively protected spot to rest, sheltered from the wind by an old loading dock. Ethan pulled out the coin once more, watching as it caught the last rays of sunlight. The engravings seemed to come alive in the golden light, hinting at stories and secrets from long ago. Little did they know that their discovery would soon draw the attention of others, people who had been searching for this very artifact for years. The coin was more than just an interesting find. It was a key to a mystery that had remained unsolved for generations. The busy square where they had found the coin would soon become the starting point of an adventure neither Ethan nor Max could have imagined. But for now they shared the quiet triumph of their discovery, unaware that watchful eyes had already noticed their presence and that their lives were about to become entangled in something far bigger than themselves. As night fell over Chicago, Ethan drifted off to sleep with Max by his side, the coin secure in his pocket. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and unexpected encounters, but tonight they had each other and their mysterious treasure, and that was enough. The bustling streets of Chicago were particularly crowded that morning as Ethan and Max made their way through the city. The coin weighed heavily in Ethan's pocket, a constant reminder of their unusual discovery. As they navigated through the sea of pedestrians, Max's behavior suddenly changed. His ears perked up, his body tensed, and his attention focused intently on something ahead. A young child, no more than 5 years old, had broken free from his mother's grasp and was running excitedly toward the street. The traffic light had just turned green, and vehicles were beginning to move. Without hesitation, Max sprang into action, his instincts taking over. The dog darted forward, catching the back of the child's shirt with his teeth just as the boy was about to step off the curb into oncoming traffic. The mother's terrified scream turned to relief as she realized what had happened. Max had pulled the child back to safety, holding him firmly but gently by his shirt until his mother could reach them. The woman who would introduce herself as Diane Turner rushed forward, gathering her son in her arms, her face a mixture of gratitude and lingering fear. Thank you so much," Diane exclaimed, her well-tailored business suit and elegant appearance contrasting sharply with Ethan's worn clothes. She reached into her purse intending to offer a reward, but stopped when she noticed Ethan's hesitation and embarrassment. Instead of money, she changed her approach. "My name is Diane Turner," she said warmly, her voice carrying a natural charm that seemed to put others at ease. "Please, let me at least buy you and your brave dog some breakfast. It's the least I can do after what he did for my Tommy." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but Max's tail wagged at the mention of food. Diane's smile seemed genuine, yet there was something in her careful observation of him that made Ethan slightly uneasy. Nevertheless, hunger won out over caution, and he nodded slowly. At the nearby diner, Diane ordered a generous breakfast for both Ethan and Max. As they ate, she asked questions about their life, her eyes showing genuine concern. However, when the ancient coin accidentally slipped from Ethan's pocket while he reached for his glass of milk, her entire demeanor changed subtly. "What an interesting piece," she remarked, her voice carefully controlled despite the evident interest in her eyes. "May I take a look at it?" Ethan reluctantly handed over the coin, watching as Diane examined it with what seemed like professional curiosity. "This is quite remarkable," she said, turning the coin over in her manicured hands. "Do you know what you found?" When Ethan shook his head, she continued, "This coin might be connected to a long-lost inheritance of one of Chicago's most influential families. Would you tell me where you found it?" As Ethan described the discovery, he noticed how intently Diane listened, her questions becoming more specific. She offered to help him learn more about the coin's history, suggesting that it might be valuable to the right people. Her proposal seemed generous, but something in her carefully measured words made Ethan maintain his guard. Throughout their conversation, Max remained alert, his eyes moving between Ethan and Diane as if assessing the situation. The dog's usual relaxed demeanor had been replaced by watchful attention, particularly when Diane discussed the coin. As they prepared to leave the diner, Diane insisted on giving Ethan her business card. "Please let me help you," she said, her voice sincere yet somehow urgent. "A young boy shouldn't be living on the streets. I have connections that could make things better for both you and your wonderful dog." Walking away from the diner, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their lives had just taken an unexpected turn. Max walked closer to him than usual, as if sharing his uncertainty about their new acquaintance. Neither of them noticed the man who had been sitting in the corner of the diner, who now followed them at a discreet distance, his presence carefully hidden among the crowd of morning commuters. The coin in Ethan's pocket seemed heavier than before, carrying the weight of secrets yet to be revealed. As they made their way through the city streets, the morning's events played over in his mind, each detail adding to a growing sense that there was more to Diane Turner's interest than simple gratitude for Max's heroic act. The days following their encounter with Diane Turner brought subtle but noticeable changes to Ethan and Max's daily routine. While they continued their usual path through the city streets, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His instincts, sharpened by months of survival, detected a presence that seemed to linger just at the edge of his awareness. Max sensed it too. The dog's behavior had become more protective, his ears constantly alert, and his head turning to track movements in the crowd that Ethan couldn't quite see. The man who followed them maintained his distance, but his persistent presence became a shadow in their daily lives. One particularly cold afternoon, while seeking shelter near an old bookstore, Ethan noticed something unusual about Max's collar. The dog had been scratching at it more frequently, and upon closer inspection, Ethan discovered a carefully folded piece of paper tucked beneath the worn leather. His hands trembled slightly as he extracted the mysterious note. The paper was old, its edges yellowed with age, and the handwriting upon it spoke of another era. The elegant script detailed something specific: the St. Clair orphanage, a place that had been abandoned decades ago after a devastating fire had claimed much of the building. The note's cryptic message hinted at connections that Ethan couldn't yet understand, but somehow he knew it was linked to the coin they had discovered. That evening, as they huddled in their temporary shelter, Ethan couldn't resist examining the coin again. The intricate symbols seemed to dance in the fading light, and now, with the mysterious note in hand, they appeared to take on new meaning. He remembered Diane's words about the coin's connection to a prominent Chicago family's lost inheritance, and the pieces began to form a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. The next morning, during their usual search for food, Ethan spotted Diane Turner approaching from across the street. Her appearance was as polished as ever, but there was an urgency in her steps that hadn't been there before. Max's tail wagged in recognition, though his stance remained cautious. "I've been hoping to find you," Diane said, her voice warm but carrying an undercurrent of excitement. "I've done some research about that coin of yours." She paused, glancing around before continuing. "There's something you should see. The St. Clair orphanage. I believe it holds answers about the coin's origin." Ethan's surprise must have shown on his face because Diane quickly added, "Yes, I know about the orphanage. It's connected to all of this in ways we're just beginning to understand. Would you let me help you investigate it?" As they discussed the possibility, Ethan noticed Max's attention fixed on something behind them. The dog's ears were erect, his body tense. When Ethan turned to look, he caught a glimpse of the mysterious man who had been following them, disappearing around a corner. Diane seemed oblivious to the observer, or perhaps she was simply better at hiding her awareness. The conversation with Diane left Ethan with more questions than answers. Her knowledge of the orphanage and its connection to the coin seemed too convenient, yet her offer of help appeared genuine. The genuine concern in her eyes warred with the calculated way she presented information, leaving Ethan uncertain about her true motives. That night, as they settled into a different shelter than usual, Ethan had begun changing their sleeping locations more frequently. He pulled out both the coin and the mysterious note. In the dim light, filtering through a broken window, he studied them side by side, searching for connections he might have missed. Max lay beside him, alert despite his apparent relaxation. The dog's presence was a constant comfort, but even he seemed to sense the growing complexity of their situation. Their simple life of survival had become entangled in something larger, a mystery that seemed to deepen with each passing day. The St. Clair orphanage loomed in Ethan's thoughts, its burned-out shell holding secrets that somehow connected to the coin in his pocket and the woman who had entered their lives so unexpectedly. Tomorrow they would need to make a decision about Diane's offer. But for now, Ethan found comfort in the steady rhythm of Max's breathing and the familiar weight of the coin against his leg. The St. Clair orphanage stood as a dark silhouette against the morning sky, its weathered facade telling stories of decades past. Diane Turner had arranged to meet Ethan and Max at the break of dawn, when the streets were still quiet and few would notice their presence near the abandoned building. The structure's imposing architecture, though damaged by time and the historical fire, still commanded attention. Diane arrived precisely on time, her usual business attire replaced by more practical clothing. She carried a large shoulder bag and a flashlight, her preparation suggesting she had done this kind of exploration before. "Ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Max stood close to Ethan, his body tense but alert, ready to protect his young friend if necessary. As they approached the building, signs of recent activity became apparent. Footprints in the dust, displaced debris, and marks that suggested others had been investigating the site. Diane noticed Ethan's observation of these details and nodded approvingly. "You have good eyes," she commented. "Yes, we're not the first ones to come looking for answers here." Inside, sunlight filtered through broken windows, creating eerie patterns on the walls. The air was thick with decades of dust and abandonment, but beneath the decay, hints of the orphanage's former grandeur remained. Ornate moldings, elegant archways, and fragments of beautiful tilework that had somehow survived the ravages of time. Max's behavior changed as they moved deeper into the building. His nose worked overtime, picking up scents that told stories humans couldn't read. He led them through corridors with purpose, as if following an invisible trail. Diane watched the dog with intense interest, her eyes narrowing whenever he showed particular attention to specific areas. In what appeared to be an old administrative office, they found the first significant clue. Among the scattered papers and broken furniture, symbols carved into the baseboards matched those on the coin. Ethan pulled out the ancient currency, comparing the markings while Diane watched with barely concealed excitement. "These aren't just decorative patterns," she explained, running her fingers along the carved symbols. "They're part of a system, a way of marking important locations. The family that owned this building used them to protect their legacy." Her knowledge seemed extensive, almost too detailed for someone who claimed to have only recently learned about the coin's significance. As they continued their exploration, Max suddenly stopped before a section of wall that appeared unremarkable. His tail was straight, his posture rigid with attention. Diane's eyes lit up with interest as she examined the area. "There's something here," she murmured, her fingers probing the weathered surface. The wall contained more symbols, these more weathered and subtle than those they'd found earlier. They formed a pattern that seemed to correspond with elements on the coin. Diane's fingers traced the markings with practiced ease, her familiarity with them raising questions she wasn't ready to answer. Throughout their investigation, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed. Occasional creaks and shifts in the building's framework seemed too rhythmic to be natural settling. Max's periodic glances toward shadowed corners confirmed his suspicions. They weren't alone in the orphanage. Their exploration revealed more connections between the coin and the building, each discovery adding layers to the mystery. Diane documented everything with her phone, her excitement growing with each new find. Yet there was something in her manner, a careful calculation in her reactions that kept Ethan's guard up. As the morning progressed, they uncovered more symbols and markings throughout the building, creating a pattern that seemed to hint at something hidden. The coin in Ethan's pocket felt warmer, as if responding to its surroundings. Max remained vigilant, his presence a reassuring constant in the increasingly complex situation. When they finally emerged from the orphanage, the sun was high in the sky. Diane's enthusiasm was palpable as she reviewed her notes and photographs. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice filled with barely contained excitement. "There's so much more to uncover. Will you trust me to help you understand what we've found?" As they parted ways, Ethan and Max watched Diane's retreating figure. The morning's discoveries had raised more questions than answers, and the weight of untold secrets hung heavy in the air. Unknown to them, the mysterious observer had also departed, carrying valuable information about their investigation to others who had their own interests in the orphanage's secrets. Following their exploration of St. Clair Orphanage, Ethan decided to learn more about the mysterious coin that had changed his life. With Max faithfully by his side, he made his way to a small antique shop he had noticed during their daily wanderings. The shop's weathered sign and dusty windows suggested it had been there for generations, a perfect place to seek answers about an ancient artifact. The bell above the door chimed softly as they entered. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses and kind eyes, looked up from his ledger. Unlike many others who might have shooed away a street child and his dog, the man smiled warmly and gestured for them to approach the counter. "What can I help you with, young man?" he asked, his voice carrying years of experience with unusual objects and their stories. Ethan hesitated for a moment before carefully removing the coin from his pocket. As soon as the shopkeeper's eyes fell upon it, his expression changed from mild interest to intense focus. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand. With careful movements, he examined the coin under a magnifying glass, his breath catching as he studied the intricate markings. "This is extraordinary," he whispered, more to himself than to Ethan. "Where did you find this?" Before Ethan could answer, the shopkeeper glanced around nervously and lowered his voice. "This coin is part of a historical set that disappeared many years ago. It represents more than just currency. It's a key to a significant fortune and a family's legacy." The man's words echoed Diane's claims, but his demeanor suggested he knew even more than he was willing to say. Max, who had been quietly observing from Ethan's side, suddenly perked up his ears and turned toward the shop's entrance. The bell chimed again, and both Ethan and the shopkeeper looked up to see a well-dressed man enter. The shopkeeper quickly wrapped the coin in a soft cloth and handed it back to Ethan, his movements surprisingly urgent. "Come back tomorrow morning early," he whispered, "There's more you need to know, but not now." His eyes darted meaningfully toward the new customer, who seemed unusually interested in their conversation, despite pretending to examine a display case. As Ethan and Max made their way out of the shop, they could feel the stranger's eyes following them. The information they had gained was valuable, but it had also confirmed that they were involved in something far more significant than they had initially imagined. Throughout the rest of the day, Ethan noticed more people paying attention to them than usual. Max stayed closer than ever, his protective instincts on high alert. They changed their routine, taking different routes through the city and avoiding their usual resting spots. That evening, as they found a new place to shelter for the night, Ethan contemplated the shopkeeper's words. The coin's connection to a historical set and a family fortune explained Diane's intense interest, but something about the situation still didn't feel right. The shopkeeper's nervous behavior and urgent whispers suggested dangers that weren't yet apparent. Max's restlessness that night reflected Ethan's own unease. The dog would periodically rise and check their surroundings, his behavior indicating that perhaps they weren't as alone as they appeared to be. The shadows seemed to hold secrets, and every distant sound carried potential meaning. As Ethan drifted off to sleep, his hand clutched the coin through his pocket. Tomorrow would bring more answers, but also likely more questions. The shopkeeper's promise of additional information offered hope, but also hinted at complications they had yet to face. Their simple life had become entangled in a web of mystery that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day. The city knights had always held their share of dangers, but now they carried the weight of untold secrets and hidden watchers. Yet amidst all the uncertainty, one thing remained constant: the unwavering loyalty between a boy and his dog, facing whatever challenges lay ahead together. Dawn had barely broken over Chicago when Ethan awoke to find something terribly wrong. Max was gone. The space beside him, where his faithful companion always slept, was empty and cold. Panic gripped his heart as he searched their temporary shelter, but there was no sign of his four-legged friend. "Max!" he called out softly, then louder, his voice echoing through the early morning streets. The dog had never wandered off before. Their bond was too strong, their dependence on each other too complete. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Retracing their steps from the previous day, Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. Had Max followed someone? Had he been lured away? The strange looks they'd received at the antique shop, the mysterious followers, Diane Turner's intense interest in the coin, everything seemed connected somehow. The city streets, usually a familiar maze of survival, now felt hostile and overwhelming without Max by his side. Ethan checked all their usual spots: the bakery alley, the quiet park, the sheltered corners where they often rested. Each empty location increased his desperation. As morning progressed, Ethan made his way to the antique shop, hoping the kindly shopkeeper might have some answers. But the shop was closed, a handwritten sign in the window indicating the owner was away on unexpected business. This couldn't be a coincidence. While standing before the closed shop, Ethan noticed a familiar figure across the street, the man who had been following them. Their eyes met briefly before the stranger disappeared into the crowd, but this time, instead of hiding, he had left something behind, a small piece of paper placed deliberately on a nearby bench. Cautiously approaching, Ethan found a hastily written note. "Your dog is safe. The coin is the key. Check the outskirts." The handwriting was different from the note found in Max's collar, but the message was clear. Someone was using Max to get to him, and ultimately, to the coin. The mention of the outskirts triggered a memory. An abandoned shelter Ethan had noticed during their wanderings, far from the city center. It was the kind of place that could hide secrets, or a kidnapped dog, without drawing attention. As he made his way through the city, Ethan noticed more eyes on him than usual. Word seemed to have spread about the boy with the ancient coin, and now, without Max's protective presence, he felt more vulnerable than ever. He clutched the coin in his pocket, its weight a reminder of how much had changed since they'd found it. The journey to the outskirts took hours. Every step without Max felt wrong, incomplete. The city gradually thinned out, buildings becoming more sparse, streets less crowded. The shelter, when he finally found it, looked exactly like the kind of place someone would use to hide something. Or someone. Approaching cautiously, Ethan heard a familiar sound that made his heart leap, Max's distinctive bark. But it was muffled, distant, as if coming from inside the building. The dog was here, but reaching him wouldn't be simple. The shelter's exterior showed signs of recent activity, fresh tire tracks in the dirt, a door that had been recently forced open and then secured again. Someone had brought Max here deliberately, using him as bait in a larger game. As evening approached, Ethan found a hidden vantage point to observe the building. People came and went, speaking in hushed tones. He caught fragments of conversations about historical value, family legacies, and hidden treasures. Max's occasional barks confirmed he was still inside, waiting. The reality of the situation became clear. This was more than just about a valuable coin. Max had been taken by someone who believed the dog could lead them to something even more significant. The coin, the orphanage, the mysterious symbols. They were all pieces of a puzzle that had put both Ethan and Max in the middle of something bigger than themselves. As darkness fell, Ethan remained hidden, planning his next move. He knew he needed help, but who could he trust? Diane Turner, with her convenient appearances and too detailed knowledge, the mysterious follower who had led him here? Or were there others yet unknown who might prove to be allies in his quest to rescue Max? As Ethan contemplated his next move outside the shelter where Max was being held, a familiar voice broke through his thoughts. "I had a feeling I'd find you here." It was Diane Turner, her usual polished appearance somewhat disheveled, suggesting she'd been searching for him. "They took Max," Ethan said simply, studying her reaction carefully. Something in her expression shifted, a flash of genuine concern mixed with what might have been guilt. "I know," she replied, lowering her voice. "And it's time I told you the whole truth." She glanced around before continuing, ensuring they weren't overheard. "That coin you found, it belongs to my family's legacy. We've been searching for it and the rest of the collection for decades." Diane explained how her family had once been among Chicago's most prominent, their wealth tied to a collection of historical artifacts that had disappeared generations ago. The coin Ethan found was just one piece of a larger puzzle, its symbols holding clues to the location of other pieces. "The symbols at St. Clair Orphanage," she continued. "They're part of a map, a guide to finding the rest of the collection. But there are others searching too, people who believe they have a claim to our family's heritage. They must have taken Max thinking he could lead them to more clues." As she spoke, Ethan noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. The carefully maintained facade of the successful businesswoman cracked slightly, revealing glimpses of someone who had spent years chasing this mystery. Her knowledge of the situation was extensive, but her emotions seemed genuine. "The man who's been following you," she added, "he's Benjamin Wells, a historian who's been trying to protect the historical significance of the collection. He's been watching over you since you found the coin, making sure you weren't in danger." This revelation answered some questions, but raised others. The mysterious follower had led him to Max, but why hadn't he intervened directly? And how much did Diane really know about those who had taken his dog? Their conversation was interrupted by movement at the shelter's entrance. Two men emerged, speaking in hushed tones about the next location and following the dog's instincts. Max's barking could be heard more clearly now, his voice carrying a note of distress that tore at Ethan's heart. Diane placed a restraining hand on Ethan's arm as he instinctively moved forward. "We need to be smart about this," she whispered. "Those men believe Max can somehow sense the locations of the other artifacts. They're using his connection to you and the coin to try to find them." The pieces began falling into place, Max's uncanny ability to lead them to the coin, his strange behavior at the orphanage, the way he seemed to react to certain places in the city. Could it be possible that his canine instincts were somehow attuned to these historical treasures? As night deepened around them, Diane shared more details about her family's history and the significance of the collection. The story was complex, involving old betrayals, hidden alliances, and a legacy that had been fractured by time and greed. Ethan listened carefully, but his focus remained on the shelter where Max was being held. Every bark from his friend strengthened his determination to find a way inside. The coin in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with each revelation, its importance now clear but its power to complicate their lives undeniable. Together, they began formulating a plan. Diane's knowledge of the collection and the people seeking it, combined with Ethan's street smarts and determination to rescue Max, might be enough to turn the situation in their favor. But as they planned, neither could shake the feeling that there were still more secrets to be uncovered, more truths waiting to be revealed in this complex web of history and mystery. The mysterious historian Benjamin Wells emerged from the shadows just as Ethan and Diane were finalizing their plan. His appearance was less threatening up close, a middle-aged man with intelligent eyes and a weathered leather satchel slung across his shoulder. His presence had a calming effect, like someone who had seen enough of history to know how to handle its mysteries. "I've been waiting for the right moment to approach you," he said softly, his voice carrying the measured tone of an academic. "What's happening here is bigger than just a lost family fortune. These artifacts represent a crucial piece of Chicago's history that needs to be preserved, not exploited." Wells opened his satchel and pulled out a folder filled with old photographs and documents. "I've spent years tracking the movement of these artifacts," he explained, spreading the papers before them. "The coin you found, Ethan, it's part of a collection that was meant to protect something far more valuable than money. The truth about a family wrongly accused of betraying the city's trust." The photographs showed the St. Clair orphanage in its prime, along with detailed images of symbols matching those on Ethan's coin. Wells pointed to specific markings, explaining how they formed a complex system of navigation designed to protect important historical documents. "The people who took your dog," he continued, glancing at the shelter, "they're not just after wealth. They believe Max has some sort of connection to these artifacts, an ability to sense their presence. And after observing you both, I'm beginning to think they might be right." Diane shifted uncomfortably at this revelation, her eyes showing recognition. "Is that why you've been watching us?" Ethan asked, pieces of the puzzle starting to align in his mind. "Partly," Wells admitted, "but also to protect you. There are people who would go to great lengths to claim this legacy for themselves, without concern for its true historical significance or the justice it could bring to families whose reputations were unjustly tarnished." The historian pulled out another document, this one showing a family tree. Diane's name appeared on one of the branches, but there were other names too, some crossed out, others connected by dotted lines, suggesting uncertain relationships. "The truth is," Wells explained, "this mystery involves several families, not just one. The artifacts were divided and hidden to protect evidence that could clear the names of those wrongly accused during a difficult period in Chicago's history. Your dog, Ethan, somehow seems to have an innate ability to locate these pieces, bringing us closer to uncovering the whole truth." As they spoke, Max's barking from inside the shelter took on a different pattern, more urgent and directed. Wells noticed immediately, his expression sharpening. "He's trying to tell us something," he said, quickly packing away his documents. The historian's presence added a new dimension to their rescue plan. His knowledge of the historical context, combined with Diane's family connections and Ethan's determination to save his friend, created a possibility they hadn't had before. "We need to move carefully," Wells advised, pulling out a detailed map of the area. "The people inside that shelter don't understand the full significance of what they're dealing with. They're focusing on the potential monetary value, missing the larger historical importance." As night settled more deeply around them, the three unlikely allies began refining their strategy. Each brought something essential to the table: Ethan's bond with Max and understanding of survival, Diane's family knowledge and resources, and Wells's historical expertise and careful planning. The shelter loomed before them, holding not just a beloved dog, but perhaps the key to uncovering long-buried truths about Chicago's past. The coin in Ethan's pocket seemed to pulse with the weight of history, as if sensing its role in the unfolding drama. The darkness provided the perfect cover as Ethan, Diane, and Wells approached the shelter. Their plan was simple, but required precise timing. While Wells created a diversion at the front of the building, Diane would use her connections to keep any potential interference at bay. This would give Ethan the opportunity to find Max through a back entrance they had identified during their surveillance. As they moved into position, Ethan clutched the coin in his pocket, its familiar weight now a source of strength rather than worry. Wells had explained how the symbols on the coin might help them navigate once inside. The same patterns they had seen at the orphanage could be found in other historical buildings throughout Chicago. The shelter, upon closer inspection, revealed its own historical significance. Behind its dilapidated exterior lay architectural features that matched the era of St. Clair Orphanage. Wells pointed out subtle decorative elements that had survived years of neglect, suggesting this building might be more than just a random choice for holding Max. "These buildings were connected," Wells whispered, indicating faint markings near the foundation, not physically but through a network of historical significance. The families who created these symbols used existing structures to hide their trail. Their plans sprang into action as Wells moved to the front of the building. His academic demeanor transformed as he engaged the guards in an elaborate discussion about building permits and historical preservation rights. Diane positioned herself near the street, phone in hand, ready to make calls that would ensure no unexpected visitors interrupted their mission. Ethan slipped through the shadows to the back entrance, his heart pounding, but his movements sure. Years of navigating Chicago's streets had taught him how to move silently, how to become nearly invisible when needed. The coin seemed to grow warmer in his pocket as he approached the door. Inside, the building was a maze of corridors and rooms, but something strange began to happen. Max's barking, though muffled, seemed to guide him. The dog's voice carried not just location, but intention, as if he were deliberately leading Ethan through the complex layout. As he moved deeper into the building, Ethan noticed more symbols similar to those on the coin. They were subtle, weathered by time, but still visible to those who knew what to look for. Following them led him to an area that felt different from the rest of the shelter, older, more deliberately constructed. Max's barking grew louder, more excited. Ethan followed the sound to what appeared to be a solid wall, but the coin in his pocket had grown noticeably warm. Running his fingers along the surface, he found irregularities that matched patterns he'd seen before. Remembering what they'd learned at the orphanage, Ethan began examining the wall more carefully. Certain bricks seemed to align with the symbols on the coin. As he pressed one that matched a specific pattern, there was a faint click, and a section of the wall shifted slightly. Behind it lay a hidden chamber, and there was Max, tail wagging furiously at the sight of his friend. But the dog wasn't alone in the space. The room was filled with old documents, photographs, and artifacts that seemed to date back to the same era as the coin. As Ethan rushed to embrace Max, he realized they had stumbled upon something significant. The chamber wasn't just a hiding place, it was a repository of historical evidence, carefully preserved and protected through generations. The documents scattered around them seemed to tell a story of family connections, hidden truths, and long-buried secrets. Max's excitement wasn't just about being reunited with Ethan. The dog moved purposefully around the chamber, his nose leading him to specific items that seemed to resonate with the same energy as the coin. It was becoming clear that Max's ability to find these artifacts wasn't just luck. It was something more, a connection to the history that surrounded them. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside reminded them that their time was limited. They needed to act quickly, but what they had discovered in this hidden chamber would change everything they thought they knew about the mystery they had stumbled into. In the dimly lit chamber, Ethan and Max worked quickly to understand what they had discovered. The documents scattered around them told a complex story of Chicago's past, one that had been deliberately hidden from public view. Wells had been right. This was about more than just a fortune. It was about restoring truth to history. Diane joined them moments later, her eyes widening at the sight of the hidden room. "This is it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "These are the documents my family has been searching for generations." She began carefully examining the papers, her hands trembling slightly as she read through long-lost family records. The chamber held more than just papers. Along one wall stood a series of small safes, each marked with symbols that corresponded to different markings on Ethan's coin. Max moved between them, his nose twitching with interest at specific locations. The dog's behavior confirmed what Wells had suspected. He possessed some inexplicable ability to sense these historical artifacts. "Look at this," Diane called softly, holding up a yellowed photograph. It showed the St. Clair Orphanage in its prime, surrounded by other buildings that formed a network of connected historical sites throughout Chicago. The shelter they were in now was clearly marked on an accompanying map, along with several other locations they had yet to discover. As they examined the documents, a larger picture began to emerge. The artifacts hadn't been hidden just to protect wealth. They were proof of innocence. The symbols, the coin, the hidden chambers, all were part of an elaborate system designed to preserve evidence that could clear the names of families who had been wrongly accused of betraying public trust. Max's attention suddenly focused on one particular safe. His tail wagged with the same intensity it had shown when they first discovered the coin. Ethan approached it carefully, studying the symbols that decorated its surface. They matched a pattern on the coin perfectly, as if they were two pieces of the same puzzle. Using the coin as a guide, Ethan began manipulating the safe's mechanism. The symbols aligned in a specific sequence, and with a soft click, the door swung open. Inside lay more coins similar to the one they had found, each marked with different symbols, but clearly part of the same set. "These aren't just currencies," Diane explained, examining one of the coins. "They're keys to other locations, other chambers like this one. Each symbol represents a different site, a different piece of evidence that was hidden to protect the truth." The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside grew closer. Wells appeared at the chamber's entrance, his expression urgent but controlled. "We need to move," he said quietly. "Others have figured out something is happening here." Quickly but carefully, they gathered the most crucial documents and the newly discovered coins. Max's behavior had changed. He seemed more alert, more purposeful, as if understanding the importance of their discovery. His connection to these artifacts was no longer just a theory, it was a crucial part of unraveling this historical mystery. Diane's eyes shone with unshed tears as she clutched a particular set of papers to her chest. "These prove it," she whispered. "These prove my family's innocence, their true role in Chicago's history." But there was something else in her expression, a realization that this discovery affected more than just her family's legacy. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Ethan noticed something else, a series of marks on the wall that seemed to tell a story of their own. They weren't just symbols for navigation, they were a message left for future generations, a plea to understand the full scope of what had been hidden here. The truth was bigger than any of them had imagined, and they had only begun to uncover its layers. The contents of this chamber would lead them to others, each holding pieces of a puzzle that had waited generations to be solved. And somehow, a boy and his dog had become central figures in uncovering this long-buried history. The escape from the shelter felt like moving through a dream. Ethan clutched the newly discovered documents while Max led their way through the shadows, his instincts proving as reliable as ever. Wells covered their rear, his expertise in navigating historical buildings helping them avoid detection, while Diane moved ahead, clearing their path through her network of connections. Back at a safe location, a small office Wells maintained for his research, they began to properly examine their findings. The documents revealed a complex web of relationships between several prominent Chicago families, including Diane's. The story that emerged was one of loyalty, sacrifice, and protection of the truth. "These papers," Diane said, carefully arranging them on Wells's desk, "they show how the families worked together to protect important historical records during a time of corruption in the city. The accusations against them were fabricated to discredit their efforts to expose the truth." Wells nodded, his historian's eye catching crucial details in the aged papers. The network of hidden chambers, the symbolic navigation system, it was all created to preserve evidence that could eventually clear their names. But they needed to ensure it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands before the right time. Max sat attentively beside Ethan, his behavior still showing that unusual awareness they had noticed in the chamber. The dog's eyes followed their movements as they laid out the coins they had recovered, each one gleaming with promise of more discoveries to come. "The symbols on these coins," Wells explained, "they're not just directional markers. They're part of a larger story, each one representing a different aspect of the truth these families tried to protect. Your coin, Ethan, was just the first piece of a much larger puzzle." As they studied the documents, Diane's expression shifted between joy at finding her family's vindication and concern about the implications of their discovery. "There are people who won't want this truth to come out," she said softly. "Even after all these years, some reputations and fortunes still rest on the lies that were told." The coins, when arranged in a specific pattern suggested by the documents, formed a map of sorts. Each symbol aligned with different locations throughout Chicago, many of them buildings that still stood, though their historical significance had been forgotten by most. "Look at this." Ethan pointed to a series of markings that matched symbols they had seen at the orphanage. "These connect everything. The orphanage, the shelter, even places we haven't found yet. It's like a trail through the city's history." Max's ears perked up at certain moments during their discussion, particularly when specific locations were mentioned. His reaction confirmed their growing understanding of his unique connection to these historical artifacts. Somehow the dog could sense the energy, the history embedded in these objects and places. Wells spent time documenting everything they had found, his careful notes creating a record of their discoveries. "This isn't just about clearing names," he explained. "This is about understanding a crucial period in Chicago's history, one that's been misrepresented for generations." The afternoon light faded as they continued their work, piecing together the complex story hidden in the documents and symbols. Each new connection they discovered led to more questions, more possibilities, more locations to explore. Diane's family story began to make more sense within this larger context. Her ancestors hadn't just been wealthy socialites. They had been part of a network of families working to protect important historical truths, using their resources and influence to create this elaborate system of preservation. As night fell over Chicago, they realized they had only begun to understand the scope of what they had uncovered. The documents from the chamber were just the beginning. There were more locations to find, more secrets to uncover, more truths to bring to light. The next morning brought new revelations as Diane finally shared the full extent of her family's connection to the mystery. In Wells's office, surrounded by the documents they had recovered, she revealed details that cast everything in a new light. "My family's involvement goes deeper than I initially told you," she admitted, spreading out old family photographs that matched some they had found in the hidden chamber. "We weren't just trying to recover lost wealth. We were trying to fulfill a promise made generations ago, a promise to protect these truths until they could be safely revealed." Wells nodded thoughtfully as he compared the photographs with his historical records. The Turner family was part of a larger alliance, he explained to Ethan. They worked with other prominent families to create this network of hidden information. The symbols, the coins, the secret chambers, all of it was designed to protect crucial historical evidence. Max lay at Ethan's feet, but his ears remained alert, especially when certain documents were handled. His reaction to specific items continued to intrigue Wells, who had begun documenting the dog's unusual sensitivity to the historical artifacts. "It's as if he can sense the connections," Wells mused, watching as Max's attention followed particular papers and coins. "These artifacts seem to carry an energy that he can detect, something that's invisible to us, but clear to him." Diane approached one of the maps they had created from the coin patterns. "Each location marked here holds another piece of the story," she explained. The orphanage was just one hub in a larger network. These families used their resources and influence to create safe havens for important documents and evidence. The morning light streaming through Wells's office windows illuminated the scattered papers and photographs, each one a piece of Chicago's hidden history. As they worked to organize their findings, patterns began to emerge that connected seemingly unrelated events and locations. "Look at this," Ethan said, pointing to a series of dates that appeared repeatedly in different documents. "These aren't random. They're coordinated events, times when different families worked together to hide or move important information." Wells quickly cross-referenced the dates with his historical records. "He's right," he confirmed. "These correspond with significant moments in Chicago's history, times when certain truths were in danger of being destroyed or manipulated." As they delved deeper into the documents, Diane's expression grew more focused. "There's something else," she said, carefully extracting a particularly old photograph. "These symbols we keep seeing, they're not just for navigation. They're a code, a way of marking which pieces of evidence support different aspects of the truth." The photograph showed a group of people standing in front of St. Clair Orphanage, their expressions serious but determined. Among them, Diane pointed out faces that matched other photographs they had found. Members of different families united in their secret mission to preserve historical truth. Max suddenly stood, his attention fixed on something outside the window. The others followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual in the quiet street below. Yet the dog's behavior reminded them that they weren't the only ones interested in what they had discovered. "We need to move quickly," Wells advised, beginning to carefully organize their findings. "Now that we understand more about the network of locations, we can be more strategic in our investigation, but others will be putting these pieces together too." Diane agreed, her professional demeanor returning as she helped sort the documents. "The next location is crucial," she said. "If these records are correct, it holds the key to understanding how all these families were connected and why they chose to protect these truths in such an elaborate way." As they prepared for their next move, Ethan looked at Max, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and led them into this extraordinary mystery. The dog returned his gaze with unwavering loyalty, ready to continue their journey through Chicago's hidden history. Back at St. Clair Orphanage, the morning sun cast new shadows on the old building's facade. With their enhanced understanding of the symbols and their significance, Ethan, Diane, and Wells saw the structure with fresh eyes. Max trotted confidently ahead of them, his awareness of the historical markers more apparent than ever. "The orphanage wasn't chosen randomly," Wells explained, as they carefully made their way inside. "It was deliberately selected as a central point in this network of historical preservation. Its location, architecture, and connection to multiple families made it perfect for their purposes." Diane traced her fingers along the wall where they had first discovered the symbols. "My great-grandfather helped design this system," she revealed. "He worked with architects and other families to incorporate these markers into buildings throughout Chicago. Everyone thought they were just decorative elements, but they were actually creating a map. Using their new understanding of the symbols and the additional coins they had recovered, they began a more thorough exploration of the building." Max led them to areas they hadn't noticed before, his behavior becoming more excited as they approached certain sections of the old structure. "The symbols here," Ethan pointed out, "they match the pattern we found in the documents about your family, Diane." He had become adept at reading these historical markers, his street-smart instincts adapting to this new kind of urban navigation. As they moved deeper into the building, they discovered more evidence of the elaborate system created by these Chicago families. Hidden panels, concealed doorways, and subtle architectural features all contained clues that had been waiting decades to be understood. "Look at this," Wells called out, his voice echoing slightly in the empty corridor. He had found another panel of symbols, these more intricate than the others. "This isn't just directional guidance, it's a key to understanding how all the locations are connected." Max's behavior changed suddenly, his attention focused intensely on a particular section of wall. The dog's instincts had proven invaluable throughout their investigation, and now they watched carefully as he indicated a specific area with his nose. Diane examined the section Max had identified, her eyes widening as she recognized something in the pattern. "These marks, they're different from the others. They're not just about navigation or preservation. They're telling us why all of this was necessary." Working together, they began to decode this new set of symbols. The story that emerged was more complex than any of them had imagined. The network of hidden chambers and marked buildings wasn't just about protecting evidence. It was about preserving a truth that would change the way people understood Chicago's history. "Your family," Ethan said to Diane, "they were part of something bigger than just protecting their own reputation. They were trying to protect the truth about multiple families, all of whom had been wrongly accused." Wells nodded, his historian's expertise helping to place these discoveries in context. These families created this elaborate system not just to hide evidence, but to ensure it would survive until the right time, until someone could understand the full story and reveal it properly. As they continued their exploration, Max's presence proved increasingly valuable. The dog seemed to understand the importance of their mission, leading them unerringly to new discoveries. His connection to these historical artifacts had become an essential part of their investigation. The morning turned to afternoon as they uncovered more evidence of the intricate network that lay hidden within Chicago's architectural history. Each discovery added another layer to their understanding of the past and the families who had worked so hard to preserve it. Their investigation led them back to Wells's office, where they spread out all their discoveries: the coins, documents, photographs, and carefully drawn maps of the symbol network throughout Chicago. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, revealing a story more significant than any of them had initially imagined. "The collection isn't just about monetary value," Diane explained, arranging the coins in a pattern suggested by their latest discoveries. "Each piece is part of a larger message, a way to prove the truth about what really happened during that crucial period in Chicago's history." Wells carefully laid out the oldest documents they had found, including papers from the hidden chamber. "These families," he explained, gesturing to the photographs, "were accused of betraying public trust, but they were actually working to protect the city's true history from those who wanted to rewrite it for their own gain." Max sat alertly beside Ethan, his eyes following their movements as they organized the evidence. The dog's unique ability to sense these historical artifacts had led them to crucial discoveries, and even now, his attention focused on specific items that seemed to hold particular significance. "The symbols we found at St. Clair," Ethan observed, pointing to their detailed notes, "they're like a key to reading everything else. Each location we discovered adds another piece to the story, proving how these families worked together to protect the truth." Diane nodded, her professional composure momentarily softening as she handled a particularly significant document. "My family's reputation, along with others, was tarnished because they refused to be part of the cover-up. They chose to protect the truth, even at great personal cost." The afternoon light filtered through Wells's office windows as they continued piecing together the evidence. Each document, each symbol, each location they had discovered contributed to a larger narrative about Chicago's past and the families who had worked in secret to preserve it. "Look at this," Wells said suddenly, holding up a newly decoded section of text. "It's not just about clearing names. These families created a failsafe. They knew someday someone would find the coin, understand the symbols, and bring everything to light." Max's ears perked up, and he moved to a corner of the room where they had stored some of their earliest findings. His behavior had become more purposeful as their understanding grew, as if he too could sense how close they were to uncovering the complete truth. "They never expected it would be a boy and his dog," Diane smiled, watching Max's careful movements. "But maybe that's exactly who it needed to be, someone who could approach this without preconceptions, who could see things others might miss." The sun was setting over Chicago as they organized their findings into a coherent narrative. The story that emerged was one of courage, foresight, and dedication to preserving historical truth. These families had created an intricate system that had waited decades for the right time and the right people to discover it. As they worked, the city outside continued its usual rhythm, unaware that within this modest office, long-buried truths were finally coming to light. The evidence they had gathered would not only clear the names of wrongly accused families, but would also reveal a crucial chapter in Chicago's history that had been hidden for generations. In Wells's office, the final pieces of the historical puzzle were falling into place. The scattered documents, ancient coins, and decoded symbols had revealed a story that would change the way people understood Chicago's past. Ethan, Diane, and Wells gathered around the carefully organized evidence, while Max maintained his vigilant watch. "These documents prove everything," Wells said, carefully arranging the most crucial papers. "Multiple families, including yours, Diane, worked together to protect historical records that powerful people wanted to destroy. The accusations against them were fabricated to discredit their efforts." Diane nodded, her eyes shining with emotion as she reviewed the vindication of her family's legacy. They created this elaborate system, the coins, the symbols, the hidden chambers, not for themselves but for future generations. They knew someday someone would need to know the truth. The collection they had discovered wasn't just valuable in monetary terms, it was priceless for its historical significance. Each piece contributed to a larger story of integrity, sacrifice, and dedication to preserving the truth. The coins, with their intricate symbols, were keys to understanding this complex network of historical preservation. "Look at how they planned it," Ethan pointed out, indicating the map they had created of connected locations. Every building, every symbol, every hidden chamber was carefully chosen. They turned the whole city into a puzzle that could only be solved when all the pieces came together. Max's role in their discovery had been crucial. The dog's unique ability to sense these historical artifacts had led them to essential pieces of evidence. Even now, His attention remained focused on their collected findings, as if he understood the significance of what they had uncovered. They would have never expected a dog to be the key to finding everything, Wells mused, watching Max with admiration. But his instincts led us to discoveries we might have missed otherwise. It's almost as if he could sense the importance of what these families tried to preserve. The afternoon light cast long shadows across their collected evidence as they prepared to share their findings with the proper authorities. The truth they had uncovered would restore reputations, correct historical records, and reveal the courage of families who had sacrificed everything to protect what was right. Diane carefully organized the most crucial documents into a presentation that would explain their discoveries. "This will change everything," she said softly. "Not just for my family, but for all the families who were wrongly accused. Their sacrifice will finally be understood." The magnitude of what they had accomplished began to sink in. Through their unlikely partnership, a homeless boy, his extraordinary dog, a businesswoman searching for her family's truth, and a historian dedicated to preserving the past, they had solved a mystery that had remained hidden for generations. Wells began the process of documenting everything properly for historical records. "This discovery will reshape our understanding of that entire period of Chicago's history," he explained. "The evidence these families preserved tells a story of integrity and courage that was almost lost to time." As evening approached, they could sense the weight of responsibility that came with their discovery. The truth they had uncovered would affect many lives and restore honor to families who had carried the burden of false accusations for generations. A week after their final discoveries, the impact of their findings began to ripple through Chicago. The evidence they had uncovered was being carefully reviewed by historians and authorities, bringing to light the truth that had been hidden for so long. In Wells's office, now filled with the afternoon sunlight, Ethan sat with Max by his side, watching as Diane prepared for a press conference that would share their story with the world. "The complete collection has been properly preserved and documented," Wells announced, carefully organizing the last of their findings. "Each coin, document, and piece of evidence tells part of a story that will finally be told in full. The historical significance is beyond what we initially imagined." The hidden chamber beneath the shelter had been officially examined, its contents carefully catalogued. Other locations, marked by the symbols, had revealed additional evidence, each piece adding to the comprehensive proof of what these families had done to protect Chicago's true history. Diane's face glowed with pride as she reviewed the final presentation. "Our families' names will be cleared," she said, her voice full of emotion. "But more importantly, people will understand the true story of how these families worked together to preserve historical truth." Max, who had been essential to their success, remained close to Ethan. The dog's extraordinary ability to sense the historical artifacts had led them to crucial discoveries, and his protective instincts had kept them safe throughout their adventure. The bond between boy and dog had only grown stronger through their shared experiences. "You know," Diane said, turning to Ethan, "there's something else we need to discuss." She pulled out some papers from her briefcase. "With everything resolved, I'd like to offer you and Max a proper home. My family owes you both so much, and we have plenty of room." Ethan felt tears welling up in his eyes as he hugged Max. From that first cold night when they'd shared a piece of bread, to uncovering historical secrets that would change lives, their journey had led them to something neither could have imagined, a real home. Wells smiled as he watched them, adding, "And I've arranged for a special educational program. Your insight into historical investigation is remarkable, Ethan. It shouldn't go to waste." The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the office where their extraordinary adventure had reached its conclusion. The coins, symbols, and hidden chambers had led them not just to historical truth, but to a new beginning. As they prepared to leave the office, Max's tail wagged happily, as if he knew that their days of struggling for survival were over. The dog that had once been a lonely stray had helped uncover historical truths, and in doing so, had found a permanent home with the boy who had shared his last piece of bread. Outside, Chicago stretched before them, its streets now holding different meanings. Each building they passed might have been part of the historical network they had uncovered, each cornerstone potentially marking another piece of the city's true history. But more importantly, These streets that had once been a place of hardship for Ethan and Max would now be the path to their new home. The story of a boy and his dog, who helped uncover one of Chicago's most significant historical discoveries, would become part of the city's legacy. Their adventure had proved that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries come from the most unexpected sources, and that loyalty, courage, and friendship can change not just lives but history itself. Dear listeners, we hope this tale of Ethan and Max has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. Their journey from the cold streets of Chicago to uncovering historical truths shows us that extraordinary things can happen when friendship and courage come together. To continue experiencing more captivating stories like this one, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. We've prepared a special playlist of similarly touching tales that you can find by clicking the link to your left. Join our community of story lovers. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that explore the depth of human experience and the power of unexpected friendships. Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't miss our upcoming content. Your support helps us continue sharing these meaningful stories with the world,